not everyone is struggling. There are some other space enterprises that are working quite well. And Tony, I think you're next to tell us a little bit about March in May.
Right. Well, China also has a very active space program. It seems to be very well planned out through about 2030. And, they have various goals they want to make. And one of them now, for instance, is to build a new international space station. It will serve countries in Asia, for instance. South Korea will be a partner on it. They want to also eventually send people to the moon, maybe about by 2030 or so. But to go to these next steps, they actually need a bigger rocket. They developed back in 2016 something called the Long March 5. And now improvements have been made in the engines that make this powerful enough to do a lot of the goals they want to do. So we had to have a test flight. On this test flight, they also tested a new capsule, which also can carry 7 people, like the Boeing and the SpaceX spacecraft. Also, this rocket is what we call a heavy class rocket. Now, here we see 3 of them. We see on the right, the Long March 5B. On the left, the Delta IV Heavy, which was the biggest rocket working until after the space shuttle left. Then recently, the SpaceX Falcon Heavy, which is sort of like 3 Falcon 9s put together. They've also made improvements, and it is actually the most powerful rocket in existence right now. But anyway, what the point is, it's putting China in the same class as these heavy boosters and will allow them to do the same kind of missions. Here's the new crew capsule. And again, it can carry 7 people. It's roughly the size of the Dragon capsule. And here's the launch center in Hainan, an island off from Vietnam. Rockets can launch safely from here without dumping boosters on the ground, which is sometimes a problem with Chinese launches. And we'll see a little bit more about that with this mission. Okay, so on May 5th, the rocket was launched. And here's a beautiful image of that rocket going into the sky. And basically, it's arranged a little bit like the Soyuz. There's a big central booster in the middle, and then 4 smaller boosters, all liquid fuel, on the sides that peel off as the rocket ascends. So it's kind of one big stage and 4 small stages. So the entire big rocket makes it into orbit. After 3 days in space, where they did some testing with 3D printing and testing a number of other things, the capsule made an automated landing in Mongolia. We see airbags inflated. So this one lands on the ground, not on the ocean. And it also has an engine that softens the landing like Soyuz. And here we see a recovery crew looking at the recovered capsule, which I hope is clear didn't carry a crew this time, but this is their first test with it. And it was a total success. The booster is actually bigger than things like Skylab or the Mir space station, which made famous, or actually infamous landings because people were worried about pieces of them running into buildings or something. Fortunately, most of the Earth is ocean, so the chances of being bonked by a big rocket are small, but this is the biggest one that comes down now.
And I can't help noticing, Tony, it goes straight over LA.
That's right. This is one of the early orbits of it. So, basically anything between the northernmost and southernmost part of its orbit could potentially be a target. And no one knew where this was going to come down. About 4 days after the capsule returned, so did the booster. And we'll see in the next picture, it actually landed just off the west coast of Africa. The yellow dot in the middle is where most of the debris hit in the ocean. But there's a little black dot, a town, it's like New Katchout, it looks like. Some pieces were found there too. So some of it did make the ground. So this is something that China will no doubt take care of. SpaceX, for instance, maneuvers their second stages into a certain crash spot in the Indian Ocean. It's to most big boosters, but China has to join that club now. And with the success of this mission, it's going to open up a lot of interesting things that start this year. There'll be a lunar sample return mission at the end of the year, but before then, in July, China has its own Mars mission with an orbiter, lander, and rover that is due to land on Mars next year, but it will also launch in July during the launch season when several countries are sending Mars missions.
Got it. Thanks.